In Neo-Vancouver's shadowy underbelly, secrets lurked. Kael navigated rain-soaked streets, his home now. A lone echo thief, once revered, now desperate. One rare echo held the key to escape. Tycho's cryptic message ignited hope and peril. A labyrinth of firewalls guarded forbidden truths. Kael's digital crusade was about to collide with reality. What secrets would be unearthed, and at what cost? Like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The rain-soaked streets of Neo-Vancouver's underbelly were Kael's home now, a far cry from his glory days as an elite echo thief. He huddled in the damp alleyway, his eyes fixed on the flickering neon sign of Raven's Den ahead. It was the only place he dared to meet with clients. Kael's fingers drummed against the worn leather of his jacket pocket, where a single rare echo awaited his ticket out of this miserable existence. A soft ping from his comms signaled an incoming message. He tensed, expecting trouble or perhaps another desperate plea for help. Instead, he saw Tycho's name flash across the screen. Kael hesitated before accepting the call, steeling himself against disappointment, or worse, a trap. "I'm not surprised you remember me." Kael's tone was laced with bitterness. "And what might that be?" Kael asked warily. "I've heard whispers," Kael admitted cautiously. "That's why I need you." Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Tycho was hiding something behind those polished words and promises. Yet, as he weighed his options and considered the allure of that massive payday, that would unravel the very fabric of society and alter the course of history forever, Kael spent the next 48 hours in a frenzy of planning, his mind racing with the intricacies of Tycho's proposal. He needed to know more about the echo stream before diving headfirst into this treacherous operation. Raven's Den was an upscale club nestled in the heart of Neo-Vancouver's financial district, a far cry from the dingy bars and back-alley meetups that were his usual haunts. Kael arrived fashionably late, dressed to blend in with the well-heeled crowd, his eyes scanning the room for Tycho. The collector finally appeared at the bar, a martini glass suspended mid-air as he nodded curtly toward an empty table tucked into a corner. "Let's discuss business," Tycho said, his gaze never leaving Kael's face. As they settled in, Kael couldn't help but notice how out of place he felt here, a relic from another world, one that had long since forgotten his existence. Yet, the prospect of finally unearthing the secrets hidden within that corrupted data feed kept him focused on the task at hand. "You mentioned defenses," Kael prompted, leaning forward to rest his forearms on the table. "What can I expect?" Tycho's smile was thin and calculating. "The echo stream is a labyrinth of firewalls and intrusion detection systems designed to protect its contents from prying eyes. It will take an unparalleled level of skill and patience to infiltrate without raising alarms." "What's at stake here, Tycho?" Kael asked bluntly, pushing aside the unease festering beneath his skin. Tycho sipped his drink, eyeing Kael with an unreadable expression. "The truth," he said simply. "Memories suppressed by those who wield power in Neo-Vancouver. Stories that should have been told, but were silenced to maintain the status quo." Kael's mind raced as he considered Tycho's words. Was it really possible that a single data feed held the key to unlocking centuries of buried history? The notion was both exhilarating and terrifying, stirring up long-dormant memories of his own. As they concluded their meeting and Kael made his exit from Raven's Den, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about Tycho's story didn't quite add up. But for now it seemed irrelevant, a minor distraction compared to the tantalizing promise of the echo stream and its hidden treasures. The next morning, Kael sat in front of a makeshift workstation in his dingy apartment, huddled over a battered laptop. He'd spent hours scouring the darknet, piecing together what little information he could find on the stream, a digital ghost story whispered about among hackers and info brokers who dared to venture too close. The more he read, the more Kael became convinced that Tycho was being deliberately vague or misleading. But for now, it seemed irrelevant, a minor distraction compared to the tantalizing promise of the echo stream and its hidden treasures. vague, and that there was far more at stake here than just a stolen data feed. The corruption running deep within Neo-Vancouver's power structures seemed to be woven into the very fabric of its existence. As night began to fall, casting long shadows across his cluttered living space, Kael made up his mind. He couldn't afford any more doubts or distractions. He needed to focus on infiltrating the echo stream and unearthing its secrets before anyone else could lay claim to them. And if that meant confronting Tycho's true intentions along the way, so be it. With a deep breath, Kael reached for the encrypted file containing his plans for the heist and began to type out the code to unlock his next move in this deadly game of cat and mouse. Little did he know, however, that his actions were about to set off a chain reaction that would forever alter the course of Neo-Vancouver's history and his own life. Kael worked through the night, huddled in front of his makeshift console, a tangle of old motherboards, salvaged hard drives, and hastily patched together circuitry which he'd set up in a nondescript storage room he rented in one of Neo-Vancouver's countless abandoned warehouses. The space was dimly lit by flickering LEDs and the glow of screens. A cacophony of beeps, hums, and hissing static filled the air as he worked to infiltrate the heavily guarded servers housing the echo stream. Every few hours, he'd step away from his work to grab a bite or take a quick nap on the old couch tucked into one corner, the soft cushions providing some semblance of comfort amidst the chaos. But even in slumber, Kael's mind remained focused on the task at hand, deciphering the cryptic patterns and codes woven throughout the stream. It wasn't until nearly dawn that he finally cracked the initial security layer, eliciting a triumphant whoop from his throat as the digital locks tumbled before him. He dove into the encrypted data, sifting through layers of obfuscated files and corrupted memory fragments. Each new discovery filled him with an adrenaline-fueled sense of urgency, as if every second he wasted could mean disaster for himself or worse, for those he cared about. It was during one such frantic stretch that Kael's console suddenly beeped loudly, a sound so unexpected it jolted him awake on the couch. He stumbled to his feet, heart racing, and quickly scanned the various screens before him, none of which offered any immediate explanation for the alert. With a growing sense of unease, he made his way over to check the main server's status. What he found there sent icy tendrils snaking down his spine, a message that seemed to appear out of nowhere, blinking angrily at him in stark red text. Delete all files related to Project Vega. If filers to compli will reset in immediate termination of access permissions. Kael felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead as he read the ominous warning, knowing full well that Project Vega was merely a cover name for the echo stream. He knew then that he had to act fast and wisely if he wanted to protect himself and whatever secrets lay hidden within the stream. Whoever had sent this message clearly meant business, and their level of access suggested they were either an extremely high-ranking system administrator or someone with ties to one of Neo-Vancouver's most powerful organizations. He quickly scanned the server logs, searching for any sign of the sender, but all traces seemed to have been neatly wiped clean before they could be traced. With a growing sense of dread, Kael realized that he was no longer operating in a vacuum. He'd inadvertently stumbled into a much larger conflict, one where he and his work had suddenly become very dangerous commodities. As he stood there, staring at the ominous message now displayed on his main screen, Kael knew he had to act fast. He could either obey this order and erase everything he'd uncovered so far, or take an enormous risk by trying to outsmart whoever was behind it. For a long moment he debated his next move, weighing the potential consequences of each option before finally making up his mind. With a deep breath, Kael reached for his encryption key, the same one used to protect the stream's contents, and began typing in the code that would send a message back to these shadowy figures. "I don't take orders from strangers." It was a bold declaration, perhaps even reckless given the circumstances, but it was also an act of defiance. And at this point, Kael had little left to lose. He hit send and waited for whatever response might come next, as he realized that his actions would either set him on a path toward freedom or seal his fate forever. The message sent, Kael couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just crossed a line, the kind you didn't come back from easily in their world. As minutes ticked by without any response, he allowed himself to feel a spark of hope. Maybe whoever was on the other end would be smart enough to realize they were dealing with someone who refused to play along. Suddenly, his comms beeped an incoming video call. Kael hesitated for a moment before answering it. Could be another demand or a threat. But then he saw Nyx's face appear on screen, a mix of surprise and wariness etched across her features as she stared back at him. "Kael, are you okay? I got your message." Her voice was low and cautious, like she wasn't entirely sure what to make of the situation either. He let out a slow breath. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just got an unexpected visit from someone who wants me to collaborate on Project Vega." Nyx's expression darkened. "That's not possible," she stated flatly. "I'd know if anyone had breached my systems." "Whoever warned you?" "That's the thing," Kael interrupted. "I'm not sure where this warning came from or who sent it, but I have a feeling they're connected to whoever is hunting me now." A flicker of concern crossed Nyx's face before she regained her composure. "We need to talk about what you've uncovered so far, starting with that echo stream," she said. "The more we understand its contents and implications, the better prepared we'll be for whatever comes next." Kael knew she was right. They couldn't afford any distractions or misunderstandings if they hoped to unravel the truth behind the stream. "Agreed," he replied, already thinking ahead to their next move. "I'll upload my files over a secure channel. Be ready to analyze everything as soon as you can." A moment of silence passed before Nyx nodded, her eyes locked onto his. "Be careful, Kael. Whatever we're dealing with, it's clear they won't stop until they get what they want from us or eliminate the threat altogether." "I know," he replied grimly, "but I'm not going down without a fight. Neither are you, so let's prepare for the worst while keeping our hopes alive." With that, he severed the connection and turned his attention to preparing everything for the data transfer. He knew time was of the essence now. As he worked, Kael couldn't help but wonder just how deep this conspiracy went, and who else besides Tycho might be involved. He recalled fragments of conversations with other clients over the years. Some had seemed overly interested in certain echoes, almost as if they were searching for something specific. Could any of them be connected to Project Vega? The question swirled through his mind like a stormy vortex, making it difficult to focus on anything else. But he knew he couldn't afford distractions, not when Nyx's life and possibly their entire futures hung in the balance. Steeling himself against the uncertainty that lay ahead, Kael finished setting up the secure channel before uploading the files, the contents of the stream now out of his hands, waiting for Nyx to decipher its secrets. With that done, he leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the dimly lit warehouse around him. Every shadowed corner and forgotten alcove, a potential hiding place. It was only a matter of time before whoever had sent that message showed up again, or someone else came knocking. He needed to be ready for anything. A sudden beep from his comms startled him back into focus. It was Nyx, her voice urgent on the line. "Kael, I've accessed the stream, and I think we're looking at a lot more than just suppressed memories. Whatever this is, it could change everything we know about Neo-Vancouver and our roles in its underbelly." His heart rate spiked as he leaned forward. This was what they'd been building toward. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'll explain everything when I get there," she replied quickly. "But for now, pack a bag, we're getting out of here before the shit hits the fan." The tone in her voice sent a chill down Kael's spine. It was serious, even panicked. Something he'd never heard from Nyx before. He knew better than to question her judgment, especially when she sounded like she meant business. "Okay," he said simply, already moving toward the warehouse exit and whatever awaited them on the other side of reality. "I'll meet you at the rendezvous point. I've got a feeling we're about to embark on a very bumpy ride." Kael emerged from the warehouse, blending into the shadows as he surveyed his surroundings. The neon lights cast a sickly glow over Neo-Vancouver's underbelly, dark alleys, run-down buildings, and desperate souls scrounging for survival or fleeting pleasure. He knew this territory like the back of his hand. It was where he'd cut his teeth in the shadowy world of data theft. Nix was right there. Little secret couldn't stay buried much longer. The stream's secrets were too explosive to contain, and someone would inevitably stumble upon them. Perhaps that anonymous source who sent Kael the warning message had ulterior motives, but for now, he trusted Nix implicitly. She'd always been his rock in this unforgiving city. He made his way through the maze of alleys, keeping to the darker corners where cameras and surveillance drones couldn't penetrate. His comms device vibrated against his ear as Nix's voice crackled through, her words a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I'm almost at the rendezvous. I found something unbelievable in that stream," she said breathlessly. "What is it?" Kael asked, his heart pounding in anticipation. "It seems we've hit pay dirt, my friend, the motherlode." Her tone was awestruck, filled with reverence for the discovery. The stream isn't just a collection of random memories. It's the complete, unfiltered archives of every major corporation and organization in Neo-Vancouver. And I'm talking about everything from personal correspondence to classified project files. "Meet you in 5, he replied, quickening his pace toward their designated safe house. He needed to see this evidence for himself to understand how far-reaching these revelations were. As he entered the cramped, dimly lit apartment, Nix was already huddled over a holographic display, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an image of Tycho's lavish estate, complete with its own private security force and state-of-the-art data centers. "I found proof that he's been working for Project Vega, a secret cabal dedicated to manipulating the echo market. Their ultimate goal? To control the flow of information in Neo-Vancouver using echoes to shape public opinion and silence dissent." Tycho, the man who'd hired him for this job, took on a new light. Was he just another pawn in a larger game? Had Kael been used all along? Too explosive to contain, they needed to release its contents before someone else did, before it was used against them. It was time to make a choice to fight the system or become part of it. Kael looked at Nix, his partner and friend, the only person he trusted in this chaotic world. "We have to leak this," he said, his voice resolute, "before anyone else gets hurt." Nix's eyes sparkled with determination as she nodded. "Then let's get to work." Together they set about preparing their digital payload, the truth of Neo-Vancouver's underbelly, ready to be unleashed upon the world. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. The work went on through the night, fueled by caffeine, adrenaline, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. Kael and Nix hacked away at the corrupted data stream, attempting to isolate key pieces that would paint a clear picture of Neo-Vancouver's darkest secrets. The task was daunting. They had a massive digital haystack to sift through, looking for needles of truth, but they were driven by their singular focus on exposing the corruption. As the first rays of dawn crept into their makeshift lab, they finally hit pay dirt. Nix let out a triumphant whoop as she uploaded a particularly damning file of video recording that appeared to show high-ranking officials from several major corporations colluding to suppress and manipulate echo streams for personal gain. Kael's eyes widened as he watched the powerful men and women on screen laughing, shaking hands, and plotting to control the narrative in Neo-Vancouver. "This is it," Nix whispered, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she began transferring the incriminating data into a secure, anonymous package. "We have enough here to shake the foundations of this entire city." Kael's mind raced with the implications. With this evidence, they could topple governments and corporations alike, but it would also put them squarely in the crosshairs of those who stood to lose power. The stakes were higher than ever before. As he glanced around their cramped safe house, he knew they wouldn't be able to stay hidden for long. Nix noticed his concern. "We'll be fine," she said, her voice laced with confidence. "We've planned this out meticulously. We can upload the contents of this package anonymously, and it will spread like wildfire." "But then what?" Kael asked, his brow furrowed in worry. "Once we're finished here, where do we go? How do we stay safe?" Nix offered a small smile. "We've arranged for secure communication channels and new identities. We'll disappear into the system, just like before." Kael knew she was right. This was how they'd done it countless times in their past. But that didn't make him feel any better about leaving everything behind once again. Still, he couldn't afford to let his fears cloud his judgment now. "We're on the cusp of something huge," Nix said, her eyes shining with excitement and a hint of desperation. "We can change this city, Kael. We just need to be brave enough to take that final step. Kael took a deep breath and squared his shoulders, steeling himself for what was to come. "You're right," he said, his voice steady now. "It's time we stopped playing by their rules and started writing our own." Together, they finalized the upload process and sat back, watching as their digital payload spread through the darknet like a virus. The wait was agonizing, their hearts pounding in sync with each passing minute as they held their breaths for the impact of their actions. The consequences were impossible to predict, but one thing was certain. They had no choice but to see this through, regardless of what lay ahead. Finally, Nix let out a satisfied sigh and turned to Kael. "It's done," she said, her voice tinged with relief and a hint of sadness. "We've set the gears in motion." As they prepared to leave their safe house behind, Kael couldn't shake off the feeling that their lives would never be the same again, a mix of exhilaration and terror at the unknown, all tied together with an unwavering sense of purpose. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Kael and Nix abandoned their hideout under a veil of pre-dawn darkness, leaving behind the digital ghosts they'd unleashed upon Neo-Vancouver's underworld. Their footsteps echoed on the deserted streets as they made their way to a rendezvous point agreed upon through encrypted channels. The chill in the air matched Kael's mood, unsettled and on edge, as he scanned their surroundings with a practiced eye, expecting any moment for Tycho's goons or Project Vega operatives to strike. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They won't be far behind." Nix nodded in agreement, her expression grim. She knew as well as Kael did that their actions would not go unnoticed or unpunished. Their lives were now a ticking time bomb, waiting for the inevitable explosion. As they turned a corner into an alleyway, their pace quickened until they reached a nondescript door hidden behind a dumpster. Nix punched in a sequence of numbers and letters etched onto the keypad, security protocols designed to keep even the most determined of pursuers at bay. The lock clicked open, revealing a narrow stairwell leading down into the bowels of the city. "Down here," Nix instructed, gesturing for Kael to follow her. He did so, his heart racing with anticipation as they descended into darkness. The air grew damp and stale, carrying the scent of mold and decay, the perfect camouflage for their clandestine operation. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a dimly lit space filled with rows upon rows of humming servers and tangled cables, a makeshift data fortress built by a loose network of anti-echo activists determined to expose the truth behind Neo-Vancouver's lucrative black market. In the center of this underground lair stood a massive console, its surface covered in an intricate array of blinking lights and holographic displays, Project Anomaly's nerve center. "What do we have?" Kael asked as he approached the console. Approached Nix, who was already busy monitoring their digital presence across the city's information highways. "A mixed bag," she replied, her voice tight with concentration. "We've got a massive spike in traffic on the darknet, as expected. But there's something else brewing, something that doesn't sit right with me." She paused for a moment before continuing. "Tycho's been making some unusual requests to his network of collectors and middlemen, high-profile ones, the kind of people who usually keep their heads down when trouble approaches." She glanced at Kael, her eyes reflecting the unease she felt. "I think he's preparing something big, something that could change the Echo game forever." Kael's gut twisted with foreboding as he contemplated Nix's words. The implications were dire. The prospect of Tycho, or worse, Project Vega, getting their hands on the stream's secrets and twisting them to further their own agendas sent icy tendrils of fear down his spine. "We need to act fast," Kael said, his mind racing with strategies to stay one step ahead of Tycho and prevent a catastrophe from unfolding. "We can't let him get away with whatever he has planned." Nix nodded in agreement. "I'll keep an eye on his movements while you start digging into Project Vega's networks. See if we can uncover anything that might give us leverage over them." She turned back to her console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface as she wove a digital web of deceit and counterintelligence. Kael began his part of the mission, plunging headfirst into the dark depths of Project Vega's labyrinthine databases. A daunting task fraught with danger, but one he was uniquely qualified for. As he navigated through encrypted servers and firewalled systems, he couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden within those digital vault secrets that could either damn or save them all. Little did Kael know that, even as he delved deeper into Project Vega's operations, his own past was about to come back to haunt him in ways he'd never imagined. The ghost of his former partner, and the betrayal that had destroyed everything they once held dear. The time for evasion was over. It was now time for reckoning, a confrontation that would threaten not only Kael's freedom, but also the fragile alliance he shared with Nix, as well as the very survival of Neo-Vancouver itself. The air inside Project Anomaly's fortress was heavy with tension, the hum of servers and machinery a constant reminder of the high-stakes operation unfolding within its walls. Kael's fingers danced across his console, hacking through layers of security to reach the heart of Project Vega's data stores. Every new file he uncovered sent a shiver down his spine. The more he learned, the clearer it became that this organization was far more sinister and far-reaching than anyone had suspected. Its true purpose went beyond mere research or corporate espionage. It was a tool of control designed to manipulate and deceive on an unimaginable scale. He'd just cracked into a particularly secure directory when Nix's voice cut through his. "Concentration. Kael, I think you need to see this." He turned to find her standing over his shoulder, concern etched across her features as she displayed the contents of an encrypted file. "Looks like Project Vega has a mole within Echo Corp," Nix replied grimly. "A high-ranking executive named Maximilian Vex has been feeding them intel and access for years. We need to contact Tycho immediately." Kael's gut twisted as he considered the implications. Their client, once their ally against the system, was apparently complicit in its corruption. "I'll patch him through," he said, his voice cold with anger. The call connected, and Kael listened intently as Nix filled Tycho in on Vex's treachery. The collector's reaction was a mixture of outrage and desperation, a man who'd been duped and used for his own ends. "I'll take care of him," Tycho vowed, the promise of violence underlying every word. "But you two need to disappear, now." Nix nodded in agreement, her eyes never leaving Kael's as she conveyed their next steps. Once they were off-grid and safe from Project Vega's retribution, they could regroup and plan their next move. The mole within Echo Corp was a vital lead, their best chance at dismantling the corruption that threatened to consume them all. As Tycho severed the connection, Kael felt the weight of the situation settle upon him, a weight borne not just by the danger, but also by the betrayal of those he once trusted. And as he turned back to his console, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, an old acquaintance whose presence would change everything. "Vex," Kael said flatly, recognizing the mole in their midst, the same man who'd sent him on his original mission to steal the echo stream. "You're coming with us." The hunter had become the hunted, and the stakes were about to get a lot higher. "Vex, explain," Nix demanded, her voice laced with suspicion as the mole stepped forward. Kael kept a wary eye on him, wondering how much he'd been privy to their plans. The man known as Maximilian Vex didn't flinch under their scrutiny. "Project Vega hired me to infiltrate Echo Corp and gather intel. My mission was supposed to be simple: extract sensitive data from the upper echelons of management. But it wasn't until I stumbled upon the stream's existence that everything changed." When Project Vega realized the power contained within the echo stream, they became obsessed. Vex continued, his voice tinged with disgust. They saw it as a tool to control not only the past but also the future. I knew then that I couldn't continue under their banner. The data I've been collecting all this time? It's meant to expose their machinations and bring them down. A small, cynical smile played on Kael's lips as he considered the irony of Vex's words. Part of Kael wondered if Vex was telling the truth, but as he looked into the man's eyes, he saw something there that wasn't quite so easily faked: desperation and a desire for redemption. "We need to get out of here," Nyx said abruptly, her instincts on high alert. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors, growing louder with each passing second. Kael nodded, his mind racing as he quickly shut down their consoles and grabbed whatever supplies they could carry. They had to move fast if they wanted to avoid capture. Vex led them toward a hidden exit, moving with a silent efficiency that belied his previous life as an infiltrator. They burst out into the Neo-Vancouver streets just as a squadron of Echo Corp enforcers rounded the corner ahead, their weapons drawn and ready for battle. Kael's heart rate spiked, but he knew they couldn't let themselves be taken alive, not when the stream's secrets were still unspoken and Project Vega would stop at nothing to silence them. He looked around frantically, searching for an escape route. The city seemed to close in on him, the towering skyscrapers looming like prison walls, and the neon lights blurring into a chaotic kaleidoscope of color and noise. Then he spotted a narrow alleyway just ahead that might provide enough cover for them to slip away unnoticed. "Go!" Kael yelled, grabbing Nyx's arm as they both charged forward. Vex followed close behind, his footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The enforcers gave chase, their shouts and gunfire ringing out through the alleyways as they plunged deeper into Neo-Vancouver's labyrinthine underbelly. The trio raced on, dodging and weaving between stacks of debris and abandoned vehicles, anything to throw their pursuers off their scent. Kael knew it was only a matter of time before Project Vega unleashed their full might upon them, but he wasn't ready to go down without a fight. As they ran, he thought back to the life he'd left behind, the one where he'd been content with stealing echoes for personal gain and never questioning the system. Now, everything had changed. He'd seen the rot beneath Neo-Vancouver's gleaming facade and wanted nothing more than to tear it all down. He glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of Vex's former adversary turned unlikely ally, Nyx, her eyes locked on some point ahead with an intensity that spoke volumes about their shared determination. Together, they might just stand a chance against the forces arrayed against them. For now, survival was their top priority. The stream's secrets would have to wait, a tantalizing promise of revelations yet to come, as Kael and his companions battled for their lives in the shadowy underbelly of Neo-Vancouver. The trio emerged from the alley, spilling onto a bustling street lined with holographic billboards touting the latest Echo experiences. Vex slowed to a stop, surveying their surroundings before nodding towards an entrance hidden behind a cluster of dumpsters. "Quick in and out," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Tycho's goons were closing in fast. Have probably alerted every security drone within a 2-block radius." Kael didn't need further encouragement. He sprinted towards the entrance with Nyx and Vex close on his heels. The narrow passage behind the dumpsters led to a dimly lit stairwell, which they descended at a breakneck pace. At the bottom, they found themselves in a cramped, dingy storage room filled with crates and boxes bearing the insignia of various Neo-Vancouver corporations. Nyx flashed Kael a mischievous grin as she began rummaging through a stack of containers marked "Confidential Data Transfer." "Tycho's private archive," she said, pulling out a small encrypted drive. "This baby contains every echo he's ever collected, minus the one we're after, of course." Kael eyed her warily, his mind racing with possibilities. If they could access Tycho's entire collection, they might uncover more about Project Vega and its true intentions. "What are you planning?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Nyx flashed him a sly smile as she inserted the drive into a nearby datapad. "Just giving myself an edge," she said. "Tycho's been playing with fire for too long. Maybe it's time someone showed him what it feels like to get burned." The datapad hummed to life, and Nix began sorting through Tycho's echoes. He wasn't just a collector, she muttered. He was actively involved in suppressing the truth about Project Vega. Kael felt a chill run down his spine at the implications. "We need to get this information out there," he said, his voice firm with determination. "To the public, not just the authorities." Nix looked up from the datapad, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "Agreed. But first, we need to make sure Tycho understands the full extent of his betrayal, and that it's not just us coming for him." Kael nodded in agreement as Nix began compiling a list of damning evidence on another encrypted drive, their ace in the hole against the collector, and everyone else seeking to silence them. As they prepared their digital arsenal, Kael couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden within Tycho's collection, and whether they were ready for the full weight of those revelations. But for now, survival depended on getting out of Neo-Vancouver alive, a feat that seemed less likely by the minute as Project Vega's agents closed in around them. "Time to disappear," Beck said, his voice a low rumble as he stood guard near the storage room entrance. "The longer we stay here, the more time they have to track us down." Kael checked his gear one last time, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He turned to Nix, who was carefully deleting traces of their presence from the datapad. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside him. "Born ready," she said, flashing him a determined grin. "Let's show them what we're made of." With their plans set in motion, Kael led his companions out of the storage room and back into the heart of Neo-Vancouver, their path uncertain but their resolve unshakable as they prepared to face whatever dangers lay ahead. They moved through the cramped, dimly lit corridors with practiced ease, their footsteps muffled by the thick foam padding on the walls. Kael led the way, his eyes locked onto the glowing exit sign in the distance. Beside him, Nix followed closely, her hand resting lightly on the grip of the pistol holstered at her hip. "The rendezvous point is just outside," Vex announced, falling into step behind them as they approached the stairwell leading down to street level. "I've got a ride waiting, courtesy of a certain acquaintance." He flashed a wry smile that barely reached his eyes. "Hopefully it's enough to shake our tails." Kael nodded, his thoughts already leaping ahead to their next move. They needed a safe house where they could regroup, analyze the data from Tycho's collection, and figure out how to release the damning evidence of Project Vega's activities onto the darknet without getting caught. As they descended the stairs, Kael's comms device suddenly crackled to life with an encrypted transmission. He hesitated for a split second before accepting it, hoping it wasn't another trap set by their pursuers. "Kael," a low, familiar voice said on the other end of the line, "we need to talk." It was Tycho, their former client turned nemesis. "What's this about?" Kael asked warily, glancing around at his companions with a silent warning. They'd anticipated Project Vega would try to contact him after they escaped with the Echo Stream data, but he hadn't expected it to come from Tycho himself. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Tycho replied sharply. "The stream you stole. There's something very valuable hidden within its depths, and I aim to find out what." Kael's grip on his weapon tightened as a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. "You're looking for the wrong things, Tycho. What we have is worth more than any amount of echoes or credits, and if you try to take it from us, you'll regret it." He cut the transmission before Tycho could respond. "What's going on?" Nix asked as Kael tucked away his comms device. Her eyes narrowed in concern. "Tycho," he said curtly, "claims he wants what we took from him, but I think there's more to it." Vex grunted in understanding. "He knows about the stream, then?" "Yeah, and he's not happy." Kael glanced at Nix, seeing her expression set in a mix of anger and determination. He knew she wouldn't back down, especially if Tycho had threatened them directly. "We need to get out of here now," he said decisively. They reached the bottom of the stairs, the heavy metal door leading outside swinging open as they approached. Kael peered cautiously around the frame before signaling his companions to follow him out onto the bustling streets of Neo-Vancouver. Their ride waited in an alley several blocks away, a nondescript van with tinted windows and a modified engine designed for speed. As they piled inside, Kael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move of its own accord. Every passerby's gaze lingered on them a moment too long. He glanced back at Nix, who was already tapping away at her datapad, analyzing their escape route and any potential surveillance. "Mix," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Her eyes met his, a fierce determination burning in their depths. "You're right," she replied firmly. "It's only just beginning." With that, the vans surged forward, disappearing into the maze-like streets as they raced to outmaneuver Project Vega and reclaim their freedom amidst the chaos of Neo-Vancouver. The city blurred by outside the tinted windows, a neon-drenched landscape of towering skyscrapers and cramped alleyways, a place where echoes ruled supreme, but truth was always hiding in plain sight. Kael's heart pounded with anticipation, his mind racing ahead to what lay beyond this moment, what secrets still needed uncovering, and who else might be waiting for them in the shadows. As they sped through the city, Kael knew that no matter how far they ran or how much data they exposed, their journey would only end when they'd ripped open the festering wounds of Neo-Vancouver's underbelly and let the truth bleed out into the light. And until then, there was nowhere to hide, only more secrets to uncover and enemies to evade. For now, they had a city to outrun and a future to forge, a quest that would take them down the darkest alleys and up the highest towers of Neo-Vancouver, with no guarantee of survival, but an unbreakable resolve to see their mission through to the very end. The Echo Stream's secrets were out, and nothing would ever be the same again. The chase was on, and Kael and Nix had no intention of losing. The van's tires squealed as it took a sharp turn down an unlit alley, leaving the neon-lit chaos of Neo-Vancouver behind. Kael gripped the door handle, his knuckles white with tension, every sense on high alert for any sign they'd been followed. "What's our next move?" she asked, her voice low and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through them both. "We need to lay low for a while," Kael replied, his gaze sweeping over the van's interior. "Dump this ride. Get new identities, everything we can to disappear from sight." "And then what?" Nix pressed, her tone hinting at the unspoken question on their minds. Would they ever be able to go back to normal after everything they'd uncovered? "We regroup," Kael said firmly. "Plan our next steps. The public knows the truth now about Project Vega and Tycho's involvement." "But that's just scratching the surface," Nix interrupted, her voice laced with frustration. "There's still so much more to uncover, so much we don't know, and so many people involved who might try to silence us." Kael's jaw clenched at the thought of all those implicated by the Echo Stream's revelations, their lives now under threat for daring to expose corruption and deceit. Nix nodded grimly in agreement. "We need to assume Project Vega will stop at nothing to erase this evidence and keep their dirty secrets buried. And we can't let that happen," Kael said, his determination hardening into resolve. "We have to keep pushing forward no matter the cost." He glanced over at Nix, a silent understanding passing between them, that they'd face whatever dangers lay ahead side by side. As if sensing their resolve, Maximilian Vex's voice crackled through the van's comm system, a chilling echo of the man Kael had once considered a mentor. "Kael," he said, his tone icy and detached, "you know I can't let you expose my work to the world." "Maximilian," Nix began, but Vex cut her off. "I have enough influence to make your lives very difficult. Consider this an ultimatum. Return the Echo Stream data and keep quiet about everything you've learned. All face the consequences." A moment of silence followed, as if he expected immediate compliance. Kael's grip on the door handle tightened, his mind racing with options, none of which involved surrendering to Vex. "You're out of your depth, Max," Kael said finally, his voice even and calm despite the storm raging inside him. "This isn't just about you or Project Vega anymore. It's about exposing the truth, no matter what it takes." A pause, then Vex's laughter, cold, ruthless, devoid of humor. "You're making a grave mistake, Kael. I hope you both understand that." The line went dead. Nix swore under her breath. He's going to stop at nothing. But he's not the only one, Kael warned, his eyes scanning the dark alleyway beyond their speeding vehicle. As they barreled on through the neon-drenched heart of Neo-Vancouver, a creeping sense of unease settled over them, aware that danger lurked around every corner, waiting to strike when least expected. For now, though, it was just them, two fugitives racing against time and the forces aligned against them. The next move was theirs, and they were ready for whatever lay ahead. The van's tires squealed as Kael took a sharp turn, weaving through the crowded streets of Neo-Vancouver's financial district. Behind them, police sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. "Time to ditch this ride," he muttered, his hands moving swiftly over the dashboard controls. The van's camouflage mode activated, blending it seamlessly into the surroundings. He checked their rear view, a sea of identical vehicles now stretched out behind them. Nix leaned forward in her seat. "How much longer can we keep running?" Kael's eyes flicked to a digital display on the dashboard, a countdown timer he'd rigged up before leaving the city. They had maybe 10 minutes left before their pursuers would figure out where they'd gone. "We need to find somewhere to lay low until things die down." He glanced over at her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands clenched into fists. "Then we decide our next move," he said finally. "We've got enough data to bring Project Vega down, but at what cost? We can't just leak everything without thinking through the consequences." Nix let out a humorless laugh. "Consequences? You think you're worried about consequences? I have an entire organization gunning for me, wanting revenge for my betrayal. My own life is nothing but one big fucking consequence." She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But I'll be damned if I let them win." Kael nodded slowly, his mind racing with the implications of their situation. He knew that feeling, that desperate determination to keep going no matter what. It was part of why he'd taken on this mission in the first place. They turned another corner, and suddenly they were facing a dead-end brick wall with no apparent exit. "Shit!" Nick shouted, grabbing the dashboard as it buckled inward. "We're pinned in." The engine sputtered and died, plunging them into an eerie silence broken only by the hum of emergency lights outside. Kael assessed the situation. The van's rear door was jammed shut, but he might be able to break out the side window. "Get ready," he said, reaching for a crowbar stashed behind his seat. He glanced at Nix. She met his gaze with a fierce determination that sent a shiver down his spine. Together they prepared to face whatever awaited them on the other side of the wreckage, and prayed they'd made it out alive long enough to change the course of history. Kael wedged the crowbar into the cracked window frame and applied all his strength. The glass groaned ominously before shattering inward with an ear-splitting crash. He shoved debris aside to create a makeshift exit, while Nix fumbled for her pistol at her hip. "Ready?" Kael asked, already stepping out into the chilly morning air. They found themselves in a back alleyway behind a dilapidated warehouse, its walls scarred by years of neglect and decay. The distant hum of police helicopters grew louder as they approached the area, their searchlights casting an ominous glow across the rooftops. "Too exposed here," Nix whispered urgently, scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. "We need to move, now." Kael nodded, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a darkened alleyway that cut through the complex. They ran in silence, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they navigated through the maze-like passageways. The air was thick with the acrid stench of chemicals and rotting waste, but it was better than being out in the open. As they turned another corner, Kael's heart nearly stopped when he spotted a lone figure waiting for them at the end of the passage, a hooded man standing motionless against the brick wall. He couldn't make out any features beneath the shadows of his hat, but something about him radiated an aura of calm menace. "It's not safe," Nix murmured, her pistol now trained on their mysterious companion. "Let's keep moving." But Kael hesitated, a strange feeling in the pit of his stomach telling him this man was someone they needed to talk to, someone who might hold the key to their survival. He motioned for them to stop. "Wait," he whispered to Nix, then approached the hooded figure with caution. As he drew nearer, Kael noticed something odd. The man's stance seemed unnatural, almost robotic. "Bex," Kael said, keeping his tone neutral. You're a long way from your usual haunts. I've been watching you, my friend, Vex replied, his voice dripping with sincerity, and I must admit I'm impressed. You and Nix have played this game remarkably well for such amateurs. Nix snorted in disgust. Amateurs, we've just outsmarted some of the most powerful organizations in Neo-Vancouver. What do you want? Ah, but that's where you're wrong, Vex said, chuckling, a low, sinister sound. You haven't played this game at all. You've simply been puppets, dancing on strings you didn't even know existed. Kael felt his grip tighten around the crowbar as anger began to simmer beneath his skin. Cut through the bullshit, Vex. Why are you here? Trying to collect a bounty, or just looking for another notch on your belt? Neither, Vex said, tilting his head slightly. I'm offering you a deal, a chance to walk away from this mess and start anew. Nick scoffed loudly. Fat chance. We're not trading our freedom for some cockamamie promise of safety. But what if I told you there's a world beyond Neo-Vancouver 1 where memories aren't bought, sold, or manipulated? Vex asked, his words painting vivid images in Kael's mind. Kael hesitated. A part of him yearned to believe in that world, to find solace and redemption. It doesn't matter, Kael said firmly, turning back to Nix. We've got this far on our own terms. We can do it again. I agree with Kael, Nix added, her voice steady. We're not for sale. Vex sighed heavily and stepped forward, revealing a small device in his hand, a portable data extractor. He held it out to them. If you change your minds. No thanks, Kael said flatly as he reached for the crowbar again, ready to resume their flight. As they turned to leave, Vex's voice called after them. Then let me make one final offer, a gift of sorts. The truth about what really lies behind Project Vega. Nix paused, glancing back at him warily. Kael felt his heart pound in anticipation. This was the information that could topple entire empires. What do you want in return? Nix asked cautiously. Vex smiled, a cold, calculating grin. Nothing not from you. But consider it my way of saying, I hope to see you on the other side. Kael and Nix exchanged a long look before nodding in unison, a silent agreement to hear Vex out, if only to glean what truth they could. With that, they vanished into the labyrinthine shadows once more, two fugitives racing against time as they chased their own destinies amidst the chaos of Neo-Vancouver. And though they couldn't know it yet, their paths had just intersected with those who would shape the course of history in ways both profound and unimaginable. End of story.